Hey Capricorn. Take a slow breath with me and listen carefully. There's a door in your life you've been avoiding for a long time. Not because you didn't see it, but because you knew once it closed, nothing would stay the same. Right now, that door is closing on its own. Not to punish you, not to rush you, but because you've outgrown the version of life behind it. If you feel this moment deep in your body, type "I'm ready" in the comments as a signal to yourself and to the universe. Because what we're about to talk about isn't just an ending, it's the beginning of the path you were always meant to walk. Alright, stay right here with me. You don't need to adjust anything. Just listen. There's something I want to say to you, Capricorn, and I'm saying it as if it's just you and me, sitting in a quiet room, late at night, when the world finally stops asking you for answers. There has been a door in your life. You've known it was there. You didn't stumble into it by accident. You stood in front of it many times. Sometimes with your hand on the handle. Sometimes just passing by, pretending you didn't notice it again. Not because you were weak. Not because you were unaware. But because responsibility has weight. And you carry responsibility better than most people ever will. You stayed because someone needed you. You stayed because it felt safer to manage what was familiar than to disrupt the balance you worked so hard to build. You stayed because stability, even fragile stability, felt better than the unknown. And maybe no one ever told you this, but that choice was never wrong. It kept things standing when they could have collapsed. It kept people afloat. It kept you functioning. But here's what's different now. You don't feel anchored there anymore. You feel heavy. Not tired in the way sleep fixes, heavy in the way that comes when a place no longer matches who you are becoming. Lately, when you think about that door, there's a quiet pressure in your chest. A knowing, a sense that staying longer won't protect anyone, not even you. And the universe has noticed that knowing. So it stopped asking you to decide. You may feel it as timing that no longer works, a situation that won't bend anymore, a role that suddenly feels too small or too costly. Things don't respond the way they used to. What once required effort now requires force. That's not resistance. That's completion. This door isn't closing because you failed. It's closing because the lesson finished teaching you everything it could. And here's the part I want you to hear clearly. You didn't outgrow this space overnight. You've been walking past its edges for a long time. Thinking differently, seeing differently, wanting differently. You just hadn't allowed yourself to name it yet. And I know what you're wondering. What happens when it closes? What happens when you can't go back? That fear doesn't mean you're unprepared. It means you're standing at the edge of something that actually matters. There's a strange kind of grief here. Even when the ending is right. Even when you know it's time. Let yourself feel that. You're not losing something that failed. You're releasing something that once worked and no longer does. Take a breath. Right here. Because once this door finishes closing, you won't need to keep explaining why you stayed so long. You won't need to justify your exhaustion. You won't need to negotiate with a version of yourself that learned survival before freedom. Something else is already moving toward you. Quietly, patiently, not rushing you, not demanding proof. Just waiting for you to stop holding the door open out of habit. And as that space behind you grows smaller, something ahead begins to make sense without needing to be forced. That's where we're going next. Stay with me. Just a little longer. There's something important about you, Capricorn, that rarely gets said out loud. You are strong in a way that doesn't ask for recognition. You carry weight quietly. You endure without complaint. And you've learned how to keep going even when the ground under you feels thin. That's been your gift. And for a long time, it was also your protection. You learned early that stopping wasn't an option. That responsibility came before rest. That if something needed to be held together, you would be the one to do it. And you did. Over and over again. But listen closely now. Because something inside you has shifted. The exhaustion you've felt lately isn't weakness. It isn't failure. It isn't you falling behind. It's the signal that a cycle has completed its work. There are seasons in life where endurance is necessary. where pushing through is the lesson, where strength is built through repetition, through showing up even when you don't feel seen. You mastered that season. What you're feeling now is what happens when you keep applying survival skills to a chapter that no longer requires survival. You may notice it in small moments. The way your patience runs out faster. The way obligations that once felt manageable now feel strangely heavy. The way you catch yourself wondering, is this really it? Is this all my life is meant to be? That question isn't ungrateful. It's honest. Because deep down, you know you've been living below your capacity for joy, below your capacity for meaning, below your capacity for aliveness. You didn't do that because you lacked courage. You did it because you were busy being reliable, being needed, being the one others could count on. And while that role shaped you, it was never meant to define you forever. The past months may have tested you in quiet ways. Moments where motivation faded, where you questioned your own instincts, where you felt like you were moving through life, checking boxes, but not actually inhabiting it. That wasn't you losing your way. That was you reaching the end of an agreement you made with yourself a long time ago. An agreement that said, I will endure this until it teaches me what I need to know. It has taught you. You now understand your limits. You understand your worth. You understand the cost of staying in places that only value your effort, not your essence. And here's the quiet truth. You don't need to push anymore to prove anything. The lesson isn't to try harder. The lesson is to stop confusing familiarity with safety. Old habits still whisper. They tell you to hold on, to wait a little longer, to keep carrying what you've always carried. But habits are not intuition, they're just echoes. What's real now is the subtle sense of space opening inside you. A pause, a breath, a realization that you don't need to suffer to earn the next chapter. Let that land. Because when endurance completes its purpose, it makes room for something gentler, something truer, something that doesn't ask you to disappear in order to belong. And as that understanding settles into your body, you may notice something else happening. The noise begins to soften. The pressure eases. And for the first time in a long while, you're not bracing for impact. You're listening. And that quiet awareness is already guiding you toward a way of living that doesn't require you to carry everything alone. Stay with me. You're doing really well. There's a quiet shift happening inside you now, Capricorn, and it doesn't announce itself loudly. It doesn't crash in. It doesn't demand attention. It arrives softly, almost unnoticed. You might feel it when something goes wrong, and your body doesn't tense the way it used to. When a situation that once sent your thoughts racing now lands in front of you, and you simply pause. Not frozen, just still. That's new. For a long time, anxiety felt like a necessary companion, like proof that you were alert, prepared, responsible. Worry kept you moving, kept you ahead of problems, kept you from being caught off guard, and in many ways it worked. But lately, that old voice doesn't have the same authority. The fear still shows up, but it doesn't grab the wheel anymore. You notice it, you acknowledge it, and then something surprising happens. You breathe. The chaos around you can be loud, but inside, there's a growing calm that doesn't collapse under pressure. That calm didn't come from things getting easier. It came from you getting clearer. You've been through enough to know that panic doesn't prevent pain. That constant vigilance doesn't guarantee safety. That overthinking isn't the same as wisdom, so your system has begun to change its response. What once felt like danger now feels like information, data, context, something to work with instead of something to fear. That's a powerful transition, because when anxiety loosens its grip, you stop reacting to life and start engaging with it. You begin to choose instead of brace, to respond instead of defend. You may catch yourself asking different questions now. Not, how do I survive this, but, what is this showing me? Not, what if everything falls apart, but, what if this is clearing space? Those questions come from a place of authority. Not control over everything, but trust in your ability to navigate whatever comes. This is what stepping out of survival mode actually feels like. Not excitement, not instant relief, but steadiness. A sense that you don't need to exhaust yourself just to stay upright. There's a dignity in that. A quiet confidence. You're not numb. You're present. You're not detached. You're grounded. And with that grounding comes discernment. You notice which worries deserve your energy and which ones were never yours to carry. You stop borrowing trouble from futures that haven't arrived. You stop rehearsing worst-case scenarios as if they're obligations. Instead, you meet the moment as it is, and that changes how life meets you back. People may notice it before you do. They might sense that you're harder to rattle, that your reactions are slower but more deliberate. You don't rush to fix everything anymore. You don't absorb every emotional ripple in the room. That doesn't mean you care less. It means you're caring from a place of strength, rather than strain. There's a maturity here that can't be faked. It comes from having faced uncertainty enough times to realize you don't need to fear it anymore. You've already survived the things you once thought would break you. So now, when life presents something unfamiliar, you don't tense. You assess, you adapt, you move. And in that movement, something opens. A sense of agency, of authorship. You're no longer living as if the world is happening to you. You're participating, engaging, steering when it matters. That's what mastery feels like. Not dominance, not control, presence. And as that presence settles in, the noise continues to fade. What remains is a clearer inner signal, a deeper trust, a knowing that you don't need to be afraid to be prepared, because you're not here just to survive anymore. You're here to live with intention. And as that realization becomes steady, you may notice something else quietly emerging. A sense of direction. Not rushed, not forced, just there. Stay here with me. There's no rush. Because what's happening now in your life, Capricorn, doesn't move in sharp turns or sudden miracles. It moves the way a long night gives way to morning. Quietly, gradually, almost without asking for attention. For a long time, you've been living inside situations that felt impossible to untangle. So layered, so interconnected, that even explaining them to someone else felt exhausting. Money tied to obligation. Responsibility tied to emotion. Decisions tied to consequences that stretched far beyond you. You weren't just solving one problem. You were holding an entire structure together. And most days, it felt like you were the only one who could see all the moving parts. The only one calculating the risks. The only one carrying the weight of what would happen if something slipped. That kind of complexity changes a person. It sharpens you. But it also isolates you. You learned how to stay alert, how to anticipate, how to manage 10 scenarios at once. And while others saw you as capable, steady, reliable, they didn't always see the quiet toll that took. Lately though, something subtle has shifted. Problems that once felt like a tangled knot are beginning to loosen. Not because you forced them to. Not because you finally figured everything out, but because the pressure holding them in place has eased. You may notice it when conversations change tone. When delays that felt endless suddenly start moving. When answers arrive without the struggle you expected. It's not dramatic. It's almost anticlimactic. Things start to sort themselves out when you stop gripping them so tightly. And that's not giving up, that's wisdom. Some of what you've been carrying was never meant to be solved through effort alone. It required timing, perspective, space. You're beginning to see where you were compensating for systems that weren't balanced. Where you were overextending to make situations workable. Where you were absorbing stress that didn't belong to you. That realization doesn't come with anger anymore. It comes with clarity. You're not untangling everything at once. You're allowing each piece to settle where it naturally belongs. And that changes how heavy everything feels. You might still have responsibilities. You might still be navigating commitments. But the sense of being trapped inside endless complication is fading. What once felt like chaos now feels like movement. And movement is hopeful. Because it means there's direction. Even if you can't see the full picture yet. You're no longer stuck inside the problem. You're standing just far enough back to see its shape. To see what matters. To see what doesn't. There's relief in that distance. A quiet kind of relief that doesn't shout but steadies you. You don't have to fix everything tonight. You don't have to resolve every loose end before you rest. Some things are already resolving without your constant intervention. That's not a loss of control, that's alignment. And as the knots loosen, as the pressure releases, something else becomes possible. You start to imagine life without the constant hum of tension in the background, without the feeling that you're always one step away from something unraveling. You start to remember what it feels like to move forward without bracing. There's space opening now. Not empty space, usable space. Space to breathe, space to choose. Space to move with intention instead of obligation. And in that space, your inner compass becomes easier to hear. It doesn't shout directions. It doesn't rush you. It simply points, steadily, patiently, as if it's been waiting for the noise to quiet before speaking again. And when you listen closely, you may realize it's been guiding you for longer than you thought. Stay with me. There's a softness here now, a clarity that doesn't rush. Something inside you has sharpened, Capricorn. Not in a harsh way, in a quiet, precise way. You're seeing things as they are, not as you hoped they would be, not as you once needed them to be. And what's different this time is that you're not trying to explain it away. There was a period in your life where you gave people the benefit of the doubt, even when your body felt uneasy. Where you reinterpreted words to make them kinder than they were. Where you told yourself they didn't mean it that way, or maybe you were asking for too much. That instinct came from loyalty, from patience, from a deep desire to keep things working. But that chapter taught you something valuable. You learned that understanding someone's pain does not require you to excuse their behavior. You learned that empathy does not mean self-abandonment, and now you don't bend reality to protect an illusion. You hear what's being said, and you notice what isn't. You feel the difference between intention and performance, between consistency and convenience, between someone walking beside you and someone simply enjoying the shelter you provide. It's not bitterness, it's discernment. You're no longer filling in the blanks to make things feel safer. You're letting the blanks speak for themselves. That changes everything, because when clarity arrives, it's almost impossible to unsee. Promises without follow-through no longer sound hopeful. They sound incomplete. Connections that stay undefined no longer feel romantic. They feel draining. Paths that look stable on the surface, but require you to keep shrinking no longer feel responsible. They feel misaligned. And the most important shift of all is that you don't argue with this knowing anymore. You don't ask yourself if you're being too strict, too cold, too demanding. You've earned the right to trust your perception. That trust didn't come from theory. It came from experience, from watching patterns repeat, from noticing who showed up and who disappeared when things got real. So now you don't chase clarity. You recognize it. You stop waiting for people to become something else. You stop investing in potential that costs you your peace. That doesn't make you closed off. It makes you available to what's actually real. There's a quiet strength in that position, a groundedness. You're no longer standing at crossroads, trying to guess which direction might work. You're standing in yourself and letting truth reveal the path. And here's the part that matters deeply. This clarity isn't isolating you. It's protecting you. It's making room for relationships that don't require constant translation. For work that doesn't ask you to betray your values. For choices that align with who you are now, not who you had to be before. You may notice fewer distractions, fewer mixed signals, fewer conversations that leave you questioning yourself. That's not loss, that's refinement. Life becomes quieter when you stop entertaining what doesn't resonate. And in that quiet, something important happens. You feel more solid in your decisions, more at ease with your boundaries, more at home in your own perspective. You're not rushing forward. You're not pulling away. You're standing still long enough for the truth to meet you without distortion. That steadiness, that calm certainty is guiding you now. Not with loud signs, not with dramatic moments, but with a steady inner alignment that makes the right direction feel unmistakable. And as you rest in that clarity, as you let it settle into your bones, you may sense something aligning ahead of you. Not demanding action yet, just revealing itself, like a horizon coming into focus once the fog lifts. Stay with me. You don't need to lean forward. Just let this meet you where you are. There's a feeling returning to you now, Capricorn. A quiet recognition, so familiar that it almost surprises you because you forgot what it felt like. It's the sense of knowing, not guessing, not hoping, knowing. For a long time, your life required you to move without certainty, to take steps because they were necessary, because they were practical, because someone had to. Direction wasn't always the priority. Stability was, momentum was, keeping things afloat was, but something has changed inside you. You're no longer moving just to stay in motion. You're starting to feel where you're actually going. It shows up subtly, in the way certain ideas now energize you instead of draining you. In the way some paths no longer tempt you, even if they look impressive from the outside. You're not chasing approval anymore. You're listening for alignment. And that's a big shift. There was a time when proving your value felt intertwined with your identity, when achievement was the language you spoke fluently because it kept you respected, needed, safe. But now, something deeper is asking to be honored. You're beginning to ask yourself different questions. Not, what will impress others, but, what feels sustainable to my soul? Not, how fast can I get there, but, will I recognize myself when I arrive? Those questions don't come from doubt. They come from maturity. You've learned that speed without direction only creates distance from yourself. That success without meaning eventually feels hollow. So you're slowing down just enough to feel your own inner compass again. It doesn't spin wildly. It doesn't pull you in 10 directions. It points quietly, consistently, toward what fits. You may notice that your goals are reshaping themselves. Some fall away without drama. Others stay but ask to be approached differently. You're not abandoning ambition. You're refining it. You want work that reflects who you are now, not who you had to be when survival was the priority. You want a life that doesn't require constant performance. One where your effort actually builds something lasting, something true, and the most important part is that you're no longer afraid to choose the slower road if it's the right one. You've lived fast out of necessity. You've carried urgency for years. You know where that leads. Now, you're choosing direction over speed, depth over display, integrity over noise. That choice doesn't isolate you. It centers you. You start to feel more grounded in your decisions, more comfortable saying no without explanation, more at ease trusting that what's meant for you won't require you to betray yourself. There's a steadiness returning to your steps, a sense that each move matters, not because it's dramatic, but because it's aligned. You don't need constant confirmation anymore. You don't need every detail mapped out. You just need to feel that internal yes. And when you do, your body responds before your mind catches up. There's less resistance, less second guessing, less internal negotiation. That's how you know you're close to the path that's actually yours. Not the one you inherited, not the one you adapted to, but the one that reflects your true rhythm. As this awareness settles in, as your direction becomes quieter and clearer, you may sense something ahead, not rushing you, not demanding action. Just waiting, like a road that finally appears, once you stop running and start walking with intention. Stay right here. There's nothing you need to reach for. What's unfolding now, Capricorn, doesn't arrive with pressure. It doesn't come with a demand to prove yourself. It doesn't ask you to brace. It feels lighter than you expected. That might confuse you at first, because for so long, movement in your life was tied to effort, to resistance, to pushing uphill while carrying weight no one else could see. You learned to associate progress with struggle. If it wasn't hard, you questioned whether it was real. But this moment is teaching you something new. The next step doesn't require armor. It doesn't require strategy sessions in your head or rehearsing conversations before they happen. It simply asks for honesty. Not loud honesty, not dramatic honesty. The quiet kind, the kind where you admit to yourself what feels right without explaining it to anyone else. You might notice that the opportunity in front of you doesn't feel urgent. It feels available. That's an important distinction. There's no rush, no threat behind it, no fear pushing you forward. just an opening that remains open even when you pause to breathe. This is where trust comes in, not blind trust. Earned trust. Trust in the fact that you don't need to force alignment. Trust in your ability to recognize when something fits. Trust that ease does not mean weakness. You've already fought the battles that shaped you. You don't need to fight the future to deserve it. And maybe for the first time, you're allowing yourself to choose without preparing for loss. You're not stepping away from responsibility. You're stepping toward coherence. There's a gentleness in this choice that feels unfamiliar but deeply relieving. You don't have to announce it. You don't have to justify it. You simply move. And when you do, you may be surprised by how little resistance you encounter. Things line up not because everything is perfect, but because you're no longer swimming against yourself. People respond differently to you now. Situations soften, timing improves, not magically, naturally. Because when you stop fighting the current, you discover it was carrying you all along. You still have strength, you still have discipline, you still have ambition, but now they're working with your intuition instead of overriding it. That creates momentum without exhaustion. You begin to realize that ease is not the absence of effort, but the absence of unnecessary struggle. And that realization changes how you move through the world. You're more patient with yourself, more selective with your energy, more present in your choices. You don't rush to arrive. You trust the movement itself. There's confidence in that, a grounded confidence that doesn't need validation. As you step forward in this way, something subtle but powerful happens. You feel supported, not in a dramatic, cinematic sense, but in the quiet way life supports those who are finally aligned with their own rhythm. Doors open at the right pace. Resources appear when needed. Conversations unfold without force. You're not chasing outcomes anymore. You're participating in your life. And that participation feels right. As if you've stopped arguing with reality and started collaborating with it. You don't need to know every detail yet. You don't need guarantees. You only need to stay present as the path continues to reveal itself step by step. And as that movement becomes steadier, as ease replaces resistance, there's a sense of arrival not at a destination but within yourself. A quiet knowing that you don't need to push anymore to move forward. You're already in motion. Stay with me. Just breathe into this moment. Because what I want you to imagine now, Capricorn, is not a fantasy. It's a memory from the future. One that's already forming. Picture your life after that door has fully closed. Not slammed, not forced. Just quietly settled into place. There's no echo behind you. No need to look back. No hand still holding the handle. And the first thing you notice is how your body feels. Lighter. Not because life suddenly has no challenges, but because you're no longer carrying armor you no longer need. For years, you wore it well. Strength, control, endurance. It protected you when you had to survive, when you had to stay sharp, when the cost of softness felt too high. But now, that armor rests on the ground behind you. You didn't throw it away in anger. You set it down with respect. Because you understand now that survival and living are not the same thing. In this new space, you wake up without bracing for impact. Your breath goes deeper, your shoulders soften. You're still capable, still grounded, still strong, but the strength feels different. It's not reactive, it's not defensive, it's rooted. You no longer measure your worth by how much you can withstand. You measure it by how honestly you show up. There's more room here for truth. More room for rest without guilt. More room for joy that doesn't have to be earned through exhaustion. You begin to notice how freely you move when you're not trying to prove anything. Conversations feel simpler. Decisions feel cleaner. Silence feels safe instead of uncomfortable. You allow yourself to want what you want without immediately questioning whether it's practical, reasonable, or acceptable to everyone else. And strangely, life meets you with the same honesty. The right people don't require explanations. The right work doesn't demand self-betrayal. The right path doesn't punish you for being human. You still take responsibility. That hasn't left you. But now, responsibility flows through choice, not obligation. You choose what you commit to. You choose what you protect. You choose where your energy belongs. And because of that, your presence carries a quiet authority. Not the kind that dominates. The kind that steadies. People feel it when you walk into a room, not because you're loud, but because you're aligned. You don't rush anymore. You don't linger where you don't belong. You trust timing because you're no longer afraid of missing out. What's meant for you recognizes you when you're finally standing as yourself. And there's something deeply human about this stage of life. A tenderness that doesn't weaken you. It refines you. You feel more compassion without sacrificing boundaries. More openness without losing discernment. You understand now that freedom isn't chaos. It's coherence. It's living in a way where your inner world and outer life are no longer at war. The door behind you closes not with finality but with relief. It doesn't take something away. It removes the temptation to return to what you've already outgrown. And in front of you, there isn't a spotlight. There isn't a demand. There's a quiet horizon, wide, unpressured, waiting for you to walk toward it, not because you have to, but because you finally can. And as you take that step, slow and deliberate, there's a sense of peace that settles in your chest, the kind that doesn't fade when the world gets loud. The kind that tells you, without words, that you're exactly where you're meant to be. And you keep walking.